What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be having a very detailed look at the flinch mechanic in Modern Warfare. I've had a lot of people wondering about just how much flinch there actually is in this game, as well as what can impact your flinch, and I've also seen quite a few misconceptions when it comes to how much flinch there actually is in this game. So let's just hop into it, and the first thing I wanted to talk about is how the flinch mechanic has actually changed this time around with Modern Warfare in relation to previous Call of Duty titles. In pretty much every previous Call of Duty game that has ever existed, the flinch mechanic would kick your actual point of aim upwards when shot, and on top of that, your actual camera or the view that you're looking from, the perspective that you're looking from, that would also shift upwards, and sometimes a little bit to the left or to the right, depending on where you were shot and from which angle you were shot. In Modern Warfare, they have adjusted this quite a bit. Your actual point of aim doesn't really move all that much with Modern Warfare. There's actually very minimal flinch for most weapons. However, your perspective shifts in a completely different way when you're shot. You actually get a bit more of what's like a screen shake rather than your perspective just shifting upwards with the flinch. So a lot of people have been saying that there's way more flinch in Modern Warfare than previous Call of Duty games, and visually you could definitely make an argument for that. But when it comes to your actual point of aim, there's barely any flinch at all in Modern Warfare, with a few exceptions that we're going to be looking at a bit later. Additionally, in previous Call of Duty games, the amount of flinch that you received from being shot was affected by a lot of factors, but one of the biggest factors in the past was how much damage the enemy's gun was dealing to you. The more damage it was being dealt with that shot, the more you would flinch. In this game, that doesn't appear to hold true, or at least there's not enough of a variance for it to really matter. So the first thing that we're going to look at today is what happens when you're shot with different classes of weapons that deal completely different amounts of damage when you have the same gun in your hand. So in all of these tests, I've got the same gun in my hands, which is the Kilo 141, and Enya is shooting me with different types of weapons. And as you can see here, there is a very small variance in how much you're flinching depending on which gun is shooting you, but it's such a small variance that you can't even really draw the conclusion that being hit with a higher damage weapon will cause more flinch to you. At the end of the day, it really doesn't seem to matter which gun the enemy is using when it comes to your flinch. And that was something that I found to be very surprising in these tests, because I'm used to the older Call of Duty games where the more damage that was being dealt to you, the more flinch you would actually have. It turns out, what matters most when it comes to how much you flinch in this game is which gun you have in your hands. So you pretty much completely control how much flinch you're going to receive, and it doesn't really seem to matter what the enemy is using. So in this next set of tests, Enya is using the same gun, shooting me in the exact same spot on the body, and now what's changing is the gun that's in my hand. And you'll notice here that there's definitely a lot of variance when it comes to how much flinch you have now, and this definitively proves that it's the gun in your hands that matters. Now, having a look at just how much flinch you're going to receive based on the gun that's in your hands, it appears that this is just tied to the weapon class. And when you have an LMG in your hand, there is almost no flinch whatsoever. Your point of aim barely moves at all. And with assault rifles and SMGs, it's pretty much the same story, although I was getting just very slightly more flinch. But generally speaking, for assault rifles, SMGs, and LMGs, the amount of flinch that impacts your actual point of aim is basically a non-issue. Now, of course, there still is that perspective screen shake a little bit, but like I said, that's just visual. That has no impact on your actual accuracy. As for pistols, you definitely start to notice some flinch here. This is where you will actually get flinched up above your target if you're aiming center mass. Marksman rifles have a little bit more flinch than pistols, and quite a bit as well. And then finally, sniper rifles have the most amount of flinch when you're holding them in your hands. So definitely some interesting results, although not surprising at all. I think a lot of people have noticed that when you're using marksman rifles, for instance, you get a ton of flinch when you're shot compared to using SMGs and assault rifles. Now, fortunately, not all is lost when it comes to using sniper rifles and marksman rifles when it comes to flinch, because with these two classes of weapons, we have the ability to use the focused weapon perk, which reduces our flinch. So having a look at the marksman rifles, this is without the focus weapon perk, and like we saw earlier, there is quite a bit of flinch involved. Now let's have a look at this same gun with the focus weapon perk equipped. And as you can see there, this pretty much eliminates your flinch. I did a little bit of math on it, it cuts your flinch down by approximately 85%. So now it's pretty much right in line with the LMG. As for the sniper rifles, with an AX-50 in my hands, this is what the flinch looks like when I'm not using the focus weapon perk, and you can see I'm flinching way above target. Whereas with the focus weapon perk, I'm still flinching a little bit above the target's head, and keep in mind, this is a very close range for a sniper rifle. So focus doesn't have the same effect on sniper rifles as it does on marksman rifles, but it does still cut your flinch down pretty considerably by roughly 60%. You're still definitely going to have to worry a little bit about flinch with sniper rifles, even with the focus weapon perk, because with those guns, you're generally going to be challenging people at longer ranges, and therefore even the smallest amount of flinch can still take you off target. But overall, I would say focus is an extremely powerful weapon perk, and I would highly encourage you to use it, especially on marksman rifles. It makes a massive difference for those guns. So that pretty much covers it for the flinch in Modern Warfare. Overall, like I said, I was very surprised to see that it doesn't seem to matter what the enemy's using. It basically only matters what's in your hands. And I was also a little bit surprised to see that there is very little flinch for most of the guns in the game. The SMGs, assault rifles, and LMGs, which are the guns that you see used most often, there is almost no flinch if you're using those guns. And this is actually really good news, because one of my biggest concerns with having a high headshot multiplier like we have in Modern Warfare is you often get those complaints that you actually benefit from being the second person to fire in a gunfight, because the first person hitting you, if you're aiming at their chest, it will just flinch you into a free headshot. That doesn't actually seem to be an issue in this game when using LMGs, assault rifles, and SMGs, because the actual flinch to your point of aim is almost non-existent with these guns. Also, it was great to find out with these tests that if you're using marksman rifles, you absolutely want to be using that focus weapon perk. Otherwise, you're going to be putting yourself at a very unnecessary disadvantage. Now, another quick note is the change to the flinch mechanic, where instead of moving your point of aim a bunch, they just shake your perspective around a bit more. Honestly, I do prefer that over the previous flinch mechanic, where your view and your point of aim would kick upwards a decent amount. I would much rather deal with that visible flinch that doesn't really impact your aim, because if you're confident with hitting your shots, then it's really not much of an issue for you. And I really do think it's okay to have some form of a flinch mechanic to give a person an advantage for landing shots on a target. So in all, I really like what they've done with the flinch in this game. Perhaps it would be nice if they were to cut down on the flinch for the marksman rifles a little bit, like the base flinch. I know focus helps a ton, but I think the discrepancy between having focus and not having focus on marksman rifles is a little bit too big, but with the exception of that, I think they actually nailed it this year when it comes to flinch. Of course though, that's just my opinion. I'd like to know in the comment section below. First off, did any of these results surprise you? And second, what do you think of the changes they've made to the flinch mechanics this time around with Call of Duty? Just let me know all of those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.